Welcome to episode 16 of the Stageworthy podcast. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. On Stageworthy, I interview people who make theater, actors, directors, playwrights, and more, and talk to them about everything from why they chose the theater to their work process and anything in between. You can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you like what you hear, I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes or whatever podcast app you use, and consider leaving a comment or rating. My guest is Victoria Urquhart, an actor and director from Toronto. She's also the founder of the Spur-Of-The-Moment Shakespeare Collective in Toronto, bringing Shakespeare to places like the Toronto Subway and more recently into hospitals. And if you're listening to this podcast when it comes out, check out the 5th annual Shakespeare's Showdown on April 24th, 2016. Now we were talking just sort of on the way over about sort of your.
I didn't want to.
It's okay.
I didn't want to burn you, so the water's not that hot.
Oh, thank you.
We are now muted. Continue on with your lovely.
Thank you.
So you were talking about how when you came out of theater school, people told you a bunch of things.
There was a lot of you shouldn't do this piece. You should do this piece for Theatre Ontario, and you need to be careful about doing this. And for me, I guess I felt a little bit of a contradiction because I wanted to give the pieces that I felt best represented me, and I was being told what best represented me, and I kind of went, well, thanks for your feedback, but and in all fairness, I was learning so much about myself as an actor at that point, but no one can really tell you what best represents you but you, and along the way you definitely learn some different things about yourself, and you definitely throw yourself into weird outlets and make mistakes, but that I think it still comes down to nobody can really represent you better than you.
Those pieces that they were telling you not to do, were they overdone? Were they like super well-known pieces?
They were a little overdone.
Yeah.
Some of them were more on the super known side. There was a piece that I was told not to do. It was from Goodnight Desdemona, Good Morning Juliet, and I was told, don't do that. Everybody does that. But I love Constance as a character, and I remember using that monologue after I graduated. After that I kind of kicked those pieces to the curb, and they became my back pocket pieces every once in a while. But I after I got out of school, I was like, I'm going to do the pieces that I want to do.
Yeah.
And here's this piece and this piece and this comedy and this comedy. And it became a lot easier for me after that. I was also in a class of amazing, lovely ladies who were all in some way or another an ingenue. So I was told I was more the quirky best friend. Well, that's true of, that's true in a context, in a comparison to everyone else in my class.
Yeah.
But the first role that I got coming out of school was an ingenue role. And I hadn't even, it wasn't until that happened that I started considering that I might be able to play that.
It's so hard in theater school figuring out what roles you're going to play when you get out.
Yeah.
Because there's always somebody he's got the oldest face, so we're going to give him all the old man characters, and he's 20. He's never going to play those roles. So what are you telling him about what his career is going to be like? And then he gets out of theater school, and all the stuff he's got is like the old man parts. And
and especially in Toronto, it's always reflective of the community, because theater is always about community.
Yeah.
So if you are doing theater in a community where predominantly the demographic is, a bunch of older white dudes, well, then you're probably going to get a show that showcases a lot of older white dudes. Now, having said that, there's a lot of Toronto communities that need to be seen and need to be represented and aren't being represented on Toronto stages.
I always think that it's the community of old white dudes who really need to see not old white dudes.
Yeah, big time. Oh, big time.
It's like I saw an article, I think I just talked about this the other day with somebody about how I saw some kind of survey that came out of England where it was like, overwhelming majority says they could not accept a female Hamlet. And I was like, well, that means that they really need a female Hamlet.
Yeah. Theater is not just about, the entertainment and the escapism at the end of the day. Some people go and see theater for many different reasons.
Absolutely, yeah.
With Spur, I do the Shakespeare-In-Hospitals program.
Yeah.
And
even when you say Spur, you're referring the full name Spur-of-The-Moment?
Yeah. Cool. Spur-of-The-Moment Shakespeare Collective. I do the Shakespeare-In-Hospitals program, and we see theater happening for many different reasons, and it is so far beyond escapism. And of all places, you'd think that it would be about escapism and it would be about just the relief, but relief comes about in many different ways. Sometimes it's escapism, sometimes it's catharsis, sometimes people want to see someone hurt just as much as they are hurting right then and there. Sometimes it's about trying to find that little kernel of enlightenment.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily relief, but it's some phrase or some mindset that they can ascribe to for that day. It's the same as affirmations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different reasons why we go and see theater, and I think that that's just what we need to remember when we are looking at, how each community is being represented, and how and what theater is happening in what community.
Yeah, I think Shakespeare for an audience is such an unusual thing because the people who really need to see it are the people who don't want to see it. Like, the subscribers to so many different theaters are predominantly aging out, and the people who you really want to get in there, especially for Shakespeare and things like that, hate it because it was sort of rammed down their throats in really poor fashion in theater in high school. When you're performing it in hospitals, are you performing with Spur-of-The-Moment for all audiences, or do you find that it skews to a particular demographic, or?
I mean, the hospital scene has a specific demographic, and part of the touring aspect is that each facility we go to has a slight change in that demographic, has a slight characteristic. There's a kind of an overarch, but then there will be little differences that we notice. In that sense, we do have a particular demographic that we cater to, which is answering one part of that question, and I forget what the other part was.
I think it was about, because I forget too. It was about the question of, your demographic. Often we see the demographic of the age,
Shakespearean
and
the demographic.
Who's seeing the plays.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are too many schools that have taught it for the stories and not for the people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We just had a debate series between Dylan Brenton of Wolf Manor Theatre and Michael Kelly of Shakespeare in Action, and Michael was so the debate went to so many lovely places. Michael was so adamant on the fact that we need to really focus in on what these people are saying as humans. Mm-hmm. We really need to connect with that. Mm-hmm. And I remember him saying, give me this amount of time in a room with these kids, and they will like Shakespeare walking out of it, because of the way that we're going, like that I can go about teaching it. Yeah. And I believe that's very true. With the way that it has set up a lot of our demographics now, this is why I believe that, one, we need to make sure that we are staging versions that are, I want to say that are, addressing present themes, and I mean they're all addressing themes that are universal and very connected to the present. But for example, we're doing Julius Caesar Project right now, and that is set in a women's prison, and it's a mid-security women's prison. And as we go about this, our director Jane Spence is fantastic, because she, for so many reasons, but the one thing that really makes me get excited is that when we examine the language, we're looking at how this language fits into this world, and how this world, as vice versa, fits into this language. As a part of that, we get to those moments where it's like, oh, what does, like, we just got into rehearsal today, and I said, okay, well, augurers in the sense of the original story talks about fortune tellers, but I mean, there could be a fortune teller in this prison. I don't know if that will necessarily be communicated. What is an augurer in this world? And it only makes a slight difference at the end of the day, as per like what the inflection is and everything. But with regards to, like, that's just one little subtle nuance that informs that world, and when we add all of these little nuances together, that's where we get to unlocking this very clear piece of Shakespeare that is very relatable to what we're dealing with here and now.
It's always been fascinating to me that, and I don't think it's just for adult audiences, but every audience that I've ever performed Shakespeare for has, the first scene is this period of language acclimation, where the room sort of listens a little more. They don't quite catch everything, but their brains are adjusting to the way the language works. And from that moment on, they don't hear it as Shakespearean. They hear it. Their understanding is really full, and I think that comes from like really good rehearsals, where you do have conversations like that, where you can debate what is the meaning of augurer in this world, because if the actors understand it, the audience follows.
Yeah, and it's a matter of how much you commit to one thing and over the other along the way too. I think. I mean, I think that's definitely one of the big keys. I think as well. I mean, there's a certain. Oh man, my history teacher is gonna love me. My theater history teacher was also my. Sorry, moving all the chairs. Don't worry, I'm not farting, world. There's a stool right by me. Hello, Toronto. My theater history teacher would always talk about aesthetic distance within a show, and how long it takes to reduce that aesthetic distance, and really bring someone into that world. And it would always be interesting because at the same time, you always knew when you were like 5 minutes away from the intermission, from the end of the show, because there would just be this slight energy shift. And whether it was from the actors or from the audience or from what was being said, maybe someone remembers, someone's seen this play a bajillion times and knows, but everybody knows when you are 5 minutes away from the end of a show. And I mean, I think that part of that is crafted within Shakespeare's language a little bit in the way that we naturally hit some of these inflections, as well as, you know, just in how we have been conditioning ourselves and working a particular scene. And you see it too in all of Shakespeare's plays. The imagery and the imagery that's being expressed in the language that informs the tactics that are being used by the characters. You get a sense of what world they're creating just from the audio. I mean, we always hear people talk about how you know, a theater and its root words and the root of that word comes from an audio base, not necessarily a visual base, and that's very true of Shakespeare. I think that when we really mine that for a piece that is so based on language, then we're able to ease that aesthetic distance that we sometimes get with language, or with like heavy language-based plays like Shakespeare.
What is your theater background? When did you first find that theater was something that you wanted to do?
That's a hard one. I must have been like 5 years old, maybe 4, and I wanted to be on the TV, and I made friends with people on the TV, and I wanted to be on the TV with my friends, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't do that. And then when I was in grade 1, I had directed and performed in a bunch of little skits that I had made up because I wanted to do that. And I had written scripts and all of these things. I was 6 years old. This is just what you do when you want to perform for an audience. So I did that. And then at the end of that year, I got this little sticker of achievement. Everybody got a certificate, and like I got a sticker that had the drama masks on it, and I didn't know what drama was. So I asked my mom, "Well, what does that mean?" And she says, "Oh, that's you know, putting on plays and acting on TV and stuff." And I was like, "Oh, acting? Yeah, I want to do that."
So you somehow instinctively knew how to create a script and how to get people to do what was written down?
Somehow. Apparently when I was like 10 years old, the first piece of theater I actually got to see that I can remember was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I went and I saw it with, it was either my mom or my grandmother, I can't remember now, but she asked me, "How do you like the play?" And I said, "Good. I liked it a lot." And she said, "Okay, do you think that you want to be on, do you think that you want to perform on that stage?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm going to direct." At 10 years old. Apparently I said that.
Wow. Did you find people try to talk you out of that when you were in high school or when you were going through school? Did anybody try to convince you that that was not something you should do?
Yes, a lot. And I think, I mean, I have actually received that from a couple different people on varying levels. At one point, my dad tried to convince me out of it. My mom still will sometimes go, "You would be really great as a translator." because I was really studious and very good at understanding, especially French. French was very easy for me.
Where does translator come from for her? Is it just because of the French, or is there...
I think part of it is the French. For her, I think my mom used to be an English teacher, and she kind of started me on my road for Shakespeare. I remember getting this very old book. It was Lamb's Shakespeare Tales, and it wasn't the actual script.
No.
But it was a series of stories that were Shakespeare, but they were rewritten by the author so that he could tell them to his sister, because the images were, if I remember correctly about the whole thing on this book, this was all told to me by a friend, so I could be totally off, but it actually makes a lot of sense too. Is these stories were they were reworded into a narrative as opposed to a full script, so that his sister wouldn't get triggered by any particular images because she had a mental illness, which I thought was really cool. And I remember reading that, and then finally getting to do some Shakespeare in high school and being like, yeah, I totally know what this is. I got this book, I got all these things, and I get there and it's like, oh, well, this is, I mean, okay, I'm gonna go and do some of my own stuff.
When did you get out of that sort of disappointment with it?
Somewhere around grade 9, grade 10, I mean, I was given, I think my first Shakespeare play that I was able to read fully on my own was Twelfth Night, and I read through that, and it was really easy for me, and I was bored with it really fast, and so I started to read some of the other plays and get a sense of what the other language is, and it didn't all hit me right away, but I started to learn different things with how the lines were written. The big thing for me was knowing that, you know, the period didn't necessarily mean, or the end of the line didn't mean that was a period. And so I would read through it and I'd start to read it out loud and go, oh, okay, this is what this thought is. And so they're kind of going at it like this right now. And then they've got this tactic, and then it just, it made a lot more sense like that. Yeah. And go ahead.
The people who tried to talk you out of theater, your mom, did your dad have a particular tactic that he wanted, career that he wanted you to follow?
My dad, both of my parents had said to me, prior to sometimes mentioning these things here and there, they would say, you know, whatever you want to do, you do it. Whatever you want to be, you go for it. You know, if you want to be a bartender for the rest of your life, if you want to be a server for the rest of your life, so long as you are taking steps to pursue that and to do that, go be happy. And I'm so grateful for that. It was then after a while that I came out as an actor.
Yes.
There would sometimes be the mentions of, like, you could do this, you know, and have you ever thought of this? And it shook me for a little bit. And I was in in high school, I was in the regional arts program for drama, and I can sometimes be a very shy person and a very introverted person, and so then, you know, you get into the high school years with your class, and there are other people who are recognized for having their ability to bring this energy to a character, and they can be loud and they can do all of these things. And I was like, yeah, I can do those things. I just don't really connect with it in the same way. I'm kind of still figuring things out, and I don't just want to put myself out there without having a sense of what that feels like yet. which, that's not the best instinct to have, and sometimes that still gets me. And that we all have our burdens to bear, and we all have our things that we work on within ourselves, within our craft. So when I was in high school, a lot of the time, because I had some different interpretations to the text, and I wanted to try out other things before I tried out the most obvious. There would be people in my class who would be kind of like, maybe you're more of a director, maybe you're more of this. Never quite directly saying, don't be an actor, but being like, you're so great at this, why don't you go and do that instead?
Did the guidance counselors know what to do with the idea of you going into theater?
I didn't give them the chance.
I don't know if they still do this in high schools, but we all had to go and talk to the guidance counselor about what we wanted to do in the future.
Yeah.
And so they could advise us on schools, and they didn't quite know how to handle somebody who wanted to be an actor going to theater, because they were all prepared to go. Science is at U of T, literate, all of the usual things. And when somebody said theater, they just sort of didn't have a frame of reference for that.
I think at the point that I was graduating, it was about 2006. At that point, there were more theater schools established in post-secondary, and so it was a little more widely accepted. The thing that I actually regret, or maybe not regret, but I had guidance counselors strongly advise me not to take university-level math courses. Because I had gotten a 68 in math as my final grade in grade 10. And I was going, but wait a minute, because these things still interest me. I'm just not getting it at the same rate as everybody.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just need to spend some more time on it. I later actually learned, now, like a year ago, I learned that I'm functioning with ADD. So some of these things make a lot more sense.
They told me something similar because I was not good at math, but I actually found out that I had learning disability where math was concerned, which took ages for anybody to tell me. Right? It was just that I was stupid up until a certain grade.
It can certainly be a blow to one's confidence about their intelligence levels and whatnot. The funny thing is, I said, okay, well, I'm still going to do math. I'll just do it at the college level, and I took this course called Personal Finance, and I wish they had it in grade 12. Because it taught me so much about budgeting, which then later helped me in founding my own company and figuring out how to make ends meet with that. But the funny part about that was there is only one in my high school. There was only one award for math, and so all of college and all of university got lumped in together, and whoever got the highest mark they got that award.
Right.
And so in grade 11, I got the award for the highest percentile in math. And I was in college math for personal finance, and all of these calculus students are just fuming because I got this award. Yeah. And I'm be mad about it now. I'm never going to see, this is grade, this is grade 11, this isn't even grade 12. Okay.
It's interesting you were talking about, the people who were outgoing, in the high school and other things, and you were more of an introvert. The number of people that I've talked to who are in theater who identify as introverts far outnumbers the people who are extroverts.
Big time.
And it's interesting because, as an introvert myself, I never have a problem getting on the stage. it's coming off the stage and people talking to me after the show
Yeah.
that I can't quite deal with.
Because you just spend so much time on the stage, and that's a draining thing. And then all of a sudden, people get really excited and want to touch base and meet the person behind that character and all of that, and that's great. But it's like I have no energy left to really address that, and like. For me, especially with my ADD, you want, like, talking to me after a show is the most, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you go and you do a character and you spend so much time and energy on it, and people want to congratulate you, and that's great, and they want to get into in-depth conversations with you, and you're just kind of going, yeah, okay, that's fun. Thanks.
I totally get that, because for me it was always on the stage. I'm here and you're there. I can connect with you, but I don't have to interact with you. You know?
Yeah.
And so there is a bit of a barrier that's created between the actor and the audience. And then when that comes down, and I have to now interact with you, it sort of was always like I managed to come up with some thank yous that I thought sounded really genuine. So people would come up and say, thank you. Thanks. They were like the stammer somehow made it sound like
a little
it was
more earnest,
genuine. But I had to I rehearsed those for a long time before I could actually like deal with people.
It's funny too, because I mean, you can always kind of get a gauge of how much presence is expected of you in a conversation. And no one is ever really 100%, but when we're up on stage, we get pretty close.
Yeah.
So depending on what show we're in, when we get out, we could still be riding off of that energy wave of so connected in this moment, or we could be like so disconnected from that, and it's not an angry thing or an I don't want to deal with you right now. It's simply like it's simply a not being aware kind of thing, because you're not present. And like I can just remember countless shows. The big thing for me with ADD is that I can have a one-on-one conversation very well. When I'm in a sea of people, and when I have to address multiple people at a time, if it's not a show, it's very hard for me to focus on one person, because like with multiple people talking,
How could you?
You don't know what stimulus to take in, and after having spent a lot of work to ask for that energy again, to bring that focus into the many conversations that are going on, and it's not even sometimes that it's overwhelming, it's just that it's not possible. And people have a hard time understanding that, and because of that, people have a hard time understanding social awkwardness and social anxiety. And I used to be the queen of non sequiturs. There are probably still a bunch of people who would tell you that I am the queen of non sequiturs, just because some of the things that I find funny and my jokes that I notice are so detail oriented that they seem to come out of nowhere to some people, and then I have to like backtrack and explain all of it, and I just
what the mind process was to get to this joke.
And I don't have the energy to explain all of that, so I'll just shoot it off when I'm that tired, and they go, huh? But I mean, that's something that you grow with, and you learn, and you develop. And sometimes it's not necessarily building on your capacity to be able to focus for extended periods of time. Although, I mean, especially for the stage, I mean, if you're doing, I was in a show that was a 3.5 hour tragedy, and then afterwards we had to strike. Like, wonderful learning experience. By the end of it, I was done. So you learn how to take care of yourself in that, and you learn you learn just how to take care of yourself socially in that. And I think that a lot of people know how to take care of themselves. They don't always know how to take care of themselves socially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it that made you want to start your own theater company?
A lot of bitterness. As I mentioned before, I walked out of Theatre Ontario and I didn't have any calls, and I had done in part the pieces that people had told me not to do, and there was this little tiny voice in the back of my head that was telling me, you're not meant to be an actor, you're gonna fail, all these things, and I said, no, I'm not. And if I have to if I have to make work for myself to get started, then I will do that. And in the ideal world, in the fantasy that we create for ourselves, it was, I'm going to make this fantastic play and I'm going to get picked up from there, and it's going to be amazing. That was definitely a part of what I was doing at the start, but then I just kind of got into it a lot more. So I started the company. I started the company out of some bitter feelings, but also some feelings and knowledge of the kind of community that I wanna cultivate and bring forward, and that a lot of that was that, and still is, that if we're gonna make Shakespeare accessible, let's really make it accessible. Let's not make it about an elite. Let's make it let's make it relatable so that it is accessible. Let's make it accessible not just for today's audiences, but for today's artists. I don't want to see a 40-year-old Juliet. I want to see a 20-year-old Juliet. I want to see a 15-year-old Juliet. I want to see a Juliet that's actually semi-close to that age. Having said that, I have seen some 40-year-old Juliets who have knocked it out of the park, and that's amazing. And really just cultivating a community of artists coming together to talk about where they came from with Shakespeare. Because when I graduated from school, I felt so out of sorts with Shakespeare, and I felt like there was so much that I didn't get that my classmates did, and it made me feel stupid. And I didn't want to feel stupid anymore. I didn't want to I wanted to. This is the great thing that I think people forget, and this is what makes people build up a little bit of a resentment for people who don't get things right away. There's always everybody comes in at a different level, and everybody comes in with a different understanding and different approach. But there's I didn't want to enter. I didn't want a community that was like, if you don't know the rules, we're not going to tell you.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to be coddled about my learning. We never stop learning, and we all come from different rule sets, and I wanted to be able to learn on my own terms, and I wanted to cultivate a community that would be okay with that and would be welcoming to that, which was a lot of where my company started. We auditioned for Shakespeare-On-The-Subway, and we had 9 different artists from various different theater schools. We had someone going into U of T. We had someone who had graduated from York. We had 2 lovely ladies who had graduated from Fanshawe, who came from more of a physical theater background with regards to the text, and more of a devised theater background. We had a Ryerson grad, we had a Humber grad, we had My co-founder had spent a year in U of T and decided that post-secondary school was not for him, and he was going to go and figure out theater and acting on his own, without there being a post-secondary education to it, which I know that that's a big thing that we hold really high in our society to go to post-secondary school, but there are so many brilliant artists who don't have that background that really needs to be regarded and
The Shakespeare on the subway. Was that just you're riding the subway at rush hour and then a scene happens that you're not expecting, or?
So we were doing street theater with a captive audience, more or less, because we'd go on to the cars, and then we would go and perform a scene or a monologue or a collective piece, such as taking the witch's text and making that into a choral piece. Now the thing that makes it a doable project, and the thing that I think a lot of people get turned off by the idea of a captive audience. And don't get me wrong, I totally understand it. Considering that a lot of our work happens in hospitals, we have a captive audience a lot of the time. We ask permission, and with hospitals, we have the luxury of being able to ask that permission. When you're doing something more street theater, like Shakespeare on the Subway, you don't have that luxury to verbally go up to someone and say, would you like to see this? Because more often than not, you're probably...
No.
They're going to say no. But there are other ways to ask permission to take the space in a way that is less so taking the space as inviting people to either be a part of it or no. And that's the thing that we really learned in our rehearsal period. We worked with a lot of different street theater artists who gave us a lot of tools with how we take the space and how we give people permission to be a part of that space, and how we cater to people who don't want to be a part of that, because it's important to not shove it in people's faces and be really peaceful about it. If someone's going to leave the space, I'm not going to follow them. If someone works to really interrupt and be seen in the middle of your piece to try and especially there are some instances where we had people with mental health issues get really paranoid, upset, really elated about it. So much that they wanted to be a part of it. There's so many different things that happen on there, and there's a total different psychology to that. You just really have to be aware of that, do your research on it, and be willing to go with the flow of what's happening. It's the same as any improv show. Just say yes to what's happening. And with that, that was the basis of what we went on to the subway with, and performing for a captive audience. The second that someone, told us no, don't do this, we don't want this here, was the second that we were like, okay, cool, we'll get off at the next stop. Sorry to disturb you.
So with this, from subway to hospitals, how does that happen?
So we got a lot of press from the subway interactions. Before I say that, I just want to preface with the subway as well. Aside from doing all of the research and learning all of the bylaws of the TTC, we also asked permission of the corporate executive. I believe he was Brad Ross. Yeah. We asked. We first did some research with him.
He's corporate or communications director.
Now that's the title. But we did some research with him beforehand, and it was for a school project and whatnot. and we learned a little bit more about it. And then I emailed him after the interview that I had with him for this research, saying, we would like to do this this coming summer. I'd just like to know your thoughts and whatnot. And he had said to us, so long as you're not disturbing so long as you're not disturbing the flow of traffic or causing too much of a scene. Too much of a scene being completely disrupting a TTC ride, then you're totally welcome to do that. So we went and did that, and then someone tried to shut us down at one point, at which point we pulled up all of our communications and said, here's the interaction that we had, here's how we know we're actually allowed to do this. We've also got this many reporters who are coming in who have already checked in with this person to make this to report on this today. So unless you want me to go and call them and say don't come anymore, this is what we're gonna have to do. But I digress. Subway to Hospitals. So after getting all of those reports and getting on the news, which was a crazy exciting time, my grandmother had said, "Would you come and perform for my senior residence?" And I of course said, "Sure. Let me see if I can get the actors together." We got the actors together, and we did another performance there, and we kind of brought all of our material together. Through that performance, I mean, all of a sudden, we, being fresh out of school, there were still things that I was learning and still things that other people were learning about the show and about Shakespeare in general. And I remember finishing that piece and going, I didn't feel really great about that, but they had so many questions afterwards, and they wanted to learn so much. And then so that was a big deal for us, and a lot of people said, you should definitely do this in here. You should do this at other residences. There are a lot of people who could benefit from this. One of my actors actually, while the news reports were going on, she cut her finger open on a tin can. This was while she was at home. She had finished a performance that day, and she cut her finger open. So she had to go to the hospital to get stitches. And she's sitting in the hospital, and the report comes on, and the guy beside her goes, "Wow, that's really cool. They should do that here." And there were all of these kind of like little hints that we should really jump in and do it. For me, my grandmother actually passed away that year, and that was kind of the real if I don't do this, I'm gonna regret it moment. But since then, like, so grateful that I've had the opportunity to do this and really get a first-hand look at what accessibility is, because people don't consider that in theater, and people don't when people think of accessibility in theater, they think of a wheelchair ramp, and making sure that there is seating for those who are not as mobile. That's one level of accessibility. When we talk accessibility, we're talking about taking some scenes from Shakespeare, slightly tweaking the images so that we're maybe not so vividly talking about the snakes and spiders that are in this particular image, or the angels and devils that are in that particular image. We're clipping those images slightly in our scene work so that we can make these scenes viewable to an audience who, say, deals with schizophrenia. And would not otherwise be able to see a scene of Shakespeare, would have never seen any Shakespeare in their life because the images are too much.
Right.
And that's accessibility on a whole different level.
Yeah.
There's also, theater by someone's bedside. There, which goes back to the mobility.
Yeah.
There's that dynamic between relatability and accessibility. And I really think that, particularly with our season this year, we're exploring how you find a common language with someone, making theater accessible through simply addressing that, seeing a piece of theater that is in French, as compared to seeing a piece of theater that is Shakespeare, as compared to seeing a piece of theater that is in Spanish, in Japanese, in all of these things. It's really interesting to see how much is picked up and how you may not understand the exact words that are going on in the language, but you do understand the story because you see how important that is to another human being. And sometimes it lies in how they're hitting the inflections, because those inflections and those sounds are hitting people on such an emotional level. Sometimes it's simply through their body language. There's another language, body language. ASL, another totally different language that isn't audio based. These are I very strongly believe that when we talk accessibility with Shakespeare, we need to get back to the fact that we are addressing it as a language that maybe not a lot of people today in our modern tongue speak, and how we bridge that gap without coddling them and going, okay, well, this means this, and we're going to cut this because that doesn't make sense anymore. We'll make it make sense, really communicate that before you decide that you want to cut it. Anyways.
That's great. I think, well, we're kind of almost at the end of our time. Are you on the social medias? Are you on?
Oh, so much. Can I give you all of?
Give us the list.
Okay. So, can I plug my shows as well?
100%, of course. Yeah.
Oh
absolutely.
God, amazing. So we have for Twitter and for Instagram. I'll say that again. For Twitter and for Instagram, we are at Shakespeare. That's SHAKESPUR. And for Facebook, we are Spur-Of-The-Moment Shakespeare Collective without any hyphens. Our website is www.spurofthemomentshakespeare.weebly.com. Yes, we are still a Weebly site. We have many shows going up right now because we created alongside the British Council and the Toronto Public Library. We created this awesome festival. It's called the Shakespeare Lives Festival, and basically we're doing a bunch of different interactive activities. Interactive activities, that seems a little redundant. Interactive programs, there we go, to celebrate the community impact that the Bard has had on Toronto. Okay. Because, yes, you know what, there are so many plays and performances that are out there that are so great, but there is a communal impact, and there is an interactive impact that has taken hold in especially indie theater in Toronto, and so we want to celebrate that. Tuesday, there is a debate between Brendan McMurtry Howlett of Shakespeare in the Rough and thank you. There's a debate between Brendan McMurtry Howlett of Shakespeare in the Rough and Jeremy Smith of Driftwood Theatre, and they are debating. It's the apocalypse, and you can only save one Shakespeare play. Which one do you save?
And this is tomorrow. This is April
April
the
12th. Yes.
So that'll be in the past when people hear this, but it's great.
Totally okay. There's another debate happening April 21st with Caitlin Riordan of Shakespeare in the Rough and Margaret of Wolf Manor Theatre. Mm-hmm. A member of Wolf Manor Theatre whose name is Margaret. She's very lovely. I've only met her over email, but she's a lot of fun.
Can you tell us what the topic of that debate
that
will be?
one is gender swapping in Shakespeare. And it's specific to women. So talking about, do we change male characters to female as we cast Shakespeare shows modernly, or do we keep them within what was originally written? We also have, this is the big one, the Shakespeare's Showdown, which is it's another theater Christmas.
So Shakespeare's is what your Shakespeare's.
Yes.
And that is
April
what is Shakespeare's?
24th. Shakespeare's is a great competitive show where and it's all live. Like none of this is pre-planned or anything. Okay. The top 9 indie Shakespeare companies in Toronto get together and they competitively read the first folio. Now, in that, the first folio, I mean, F's are S's and U's are V's. It's very calligraphic. Yeah. It's hard to read. So if they screw up, they have to drink. And there's a lot of drinking.
Okay.
And the great thing is, we have had Stratford actors do this alongside actors just out of theater school, and the results will surprise you. We have a couple different rounds of this, one of which is the Fool's Round. So someone who has failed and failed gloriously gets their own round just to continue to make these mistakes in the most comedic way that they can. There's also, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved with this. So there's some trivia going on within that. There's an opportunity to win tickets to the Shaw Festival, as well as some different restaurant gift certificates. And tweet seats, the front row seats, are $18, and you get a free beer. If you go in a group of 5, you get a party pack, so you get some free T-shirts as well as some swag as per what team you want to root for. And yeah, general admission is $15. April 24th, Sunday night, not this Sunday, but the next.
The 24th? Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
Thank you
possibly
so much.
the longest plug I've done.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.